All right, so today we're diving into a whole bunch of current events, and yeah, this can be great for all you UPSC aspirants out there.
Yeah, it's April 10th, 2025, part one of our daily deep dives, just to keep you up to speed with everything you need to know.
And, some of the stuff we might have touched on before, but hey, repetition is the key to mastery,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely. It never hurts to go back and solidify those concepts and connect them with what's happening right now.
So where do we even begin? We've got a lot to unpack today, from space exploration to the intricacies of the Indian government and some cutting-edge science breakthroughs.
And they're all related, right? It's
Yep.
all part of the bigger picture, which is what makes it so fascinating for those preparing for the UPSC exams.
Okay, first up, let's talk about the Soyuz spacecraft launch. I mean, this one was kind of special, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was. I mean, first off, it was decorated to commemorate the 80th anniversary of the end of World War II, which is pretty cool.
Oh, it is. It is. But what I thought was really interesting was that it had an American astronaut on board with two Russian cosmonauts headed to the ISS.
Right, like in a world that can be so divided, especially politically, it's remarkable to see that kind of international collaboration happening in space.
Makes you think about the power of science to transcend those boundaries, doesn't it?
It does. And it makes you think about the strength of those partnerships, too. I mean, to keep something like the ISS running smoothly takes a huge amount of trust and coordination.
For sure. Now, speaking of the Soyuz, for those who are studying for their exams, it's important to know a bit about the program itself, right?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the Soyuz program is a big deal. It's a Russian, well, formerly Soviet spacecraft program. And it's actually the longest continuously operational human spacecraft program out there.
Wow, longest running. I mean, that's pretty impressive.
It is. It is. Its first crewed flight was all the way back in 1967.
1967. Okay, so before I was even born. Now, the name Soyuz, does that mean anything?
Yeah, it actually means union, which is kind of fitting given its role in international collaboration, like we were just talking about.
That's a good point. That's a good point. And the fact that it's still going strong today with all the updates and modifications says a lot about its design.
Right. I mean, think about it. It was designed over half a century ago, and it's still a crucial part of getting people to and from the ISS.
And it's not just the Soyuz spacecraft itself, right? The Soyuz rockets that launch them have an amazing track record as well.
Oh, yeah. They're known for their reliability. Over 1,680 successful launches, carrying satellites and crewed missions alike.
1,680. That's a pretty huge number. But I guess they're not reusable, are they? Like some of the newer ones we're seeing from private companies?
No, they're not. That's a key difference to keep in mind when you're comparing different space programs.
Makes sense. So how long does it actually take to get to the ISS on one of these things?
Well, it depends on the mission profile. It can take around 6 hours, or sometimes they take a more scenic route, and it takes about 2 days.
2 days, huh? Imagine being cooped up in that thing for 2 whole days.
Well, it's not exactly spacious. The Soyuz has a launch weight of about 7 tons. It's 7.2 meters long and has a diameter of 2.7 meters. And once the solar panels are deployed, those add another 10.6 meters to its wingspan.
10.6 meters. So it's not tiny, but it's definitely not roomy. And how many people can it carry?
It can carry up to 3 astronauts at a time.
Okay, 3 astronauts. So what's it like inside? Like, how's it laid out?
Well, the Soyuz is actually made up of 3 main modules. At the front, you have the orbital module. That's where all the docking equipment is, so they can connect with the ISS.
Right, right. So what about the other 2 modules?
Okay, so at the back, you have the service module. That's kind of the heart of the spacecraft. It's got all the essentials like the communication systems, altitude control, and the solar panels to keep everything powered.
And the middle section.
That's the descent module. That's where the astronauts spend most of their time during the mission, and it's the only part that's actually designed to survive re-entry back into the Earth's atmosphere.
Oh, so the other 2 modules just like burn up on re-entry?
Yeah, pretty much. They're not built to withstand those kinds of temperatures and forces.
Wow, so it's kind of like a one-way trip for those modules.
Ugh.
Speaking of amazing things in nature, did you hear about the new species of snail discovered in India?
Oh yeah, the Theobaldius konkanensis. Fascinating little creature.
That name's a mouthful. Where did they find it?
In the Konkan region of Maharashtra, believe it or not.
Maharashtra, huh? So in the Western Ghats.
That's right, the northern part of the Western Ghats.
Yeah.
And get this, it's endemic to that region, meaning you won't find it anywhere else on Earth.
Endemic, that's right. I remember learning about that for the UPSC exams. It's a pretty important concept when you're talking about biodiversity and conservation.
Absolutely. And the Western Ghats are a biodiversity hotspot. So this discovery is a big deal. It just highlights how much there still is to learn about the life that thrives there.
So what kind of environment does this snail live in?
Mainly tropical evergreen and semi-evergreen forests. Those lush, humid forests that are sadly facing a lot of pressure these days.
Yeah, that's true. So when did the researchers actually spot this snail?
Well, they mostly found live specimens during the monsoon season, from June to September.
Makes sense. It's got to be pretty dry the rest of the year.
Yeah, during those drier months, they mostly just found empty shells. So there's still a lot to figure out about their life cycle and how they survive throughout the year.
That's pretty interesting. And what about the snail's appearance? Anything unique about it?
Oh, yeah, it's got some pretty distinctive features. For
Mhm.
one, it's active both during the day and night, which is kind of unusual for snails.
So it's not just a slow-moving nocturnal creature like we usually think of.
Nope, this one's got some pep in its step. And it seems to live alongside other types of ground-dwelling snails, so there's probably some interesting competition and interactions going on there.
Oh, I see. And what about its shell?
Well, it's somewhat flattened with a raised area in the center. And near the opening, there's this triangular-shaped projection. The operculum, which is the little door it uses to close up its shell, has a raised edge with tiny spines on it.
Tiny spines. Wow. So it's a pretty well-protected snail.
It seems so. And the shell itself is kind of a yellowish-brown color with darker brown stripes. The snail's body is stout and rounded.
Okay, so I'll keep an eye out for that next time I'm trekking through the Western Ghats. Now, let's move on to something completely different. De-extinction. Have you been following this whole thing with colossal biosciences?
Oh yeah, that's some seriously futuristic stuff.
Yeah.
Genetically modified wolf pups, can you believe it?
It's like something out of a sci-fi movie, right? But what exactly is de-extinction?
Well, it's basically the attempt to bring back species that have gone extinct using their genetic material.
Like using DNA from fossils and stuff.
Exactly. And it involves some pretty advanced techniques like gene editing and cloning. The idea is to reconstruct the genome of the extinct animal and then try to introduce those traits into a closely related living species.
So it's not just about cloning, it's about like recreating those extinct traits.
Right. And the species they're working on is the dire wolf. Aedosiandirus, the big prehistoric wolves from North America.
Oh, yeah, the ones that were bigger than modern wolves. I think I've seen them in a documentary or two.
Yeah, and they probably had thicker coats, maybe even white coats. They were apex predators, feeding on big animals like bison, horses, even mammoths.
Whoa, mammoths! That's insane. So what happened to them? Why'd they go extinct?
Well, the most likely explanation is that they went extinct when those large prey animals started disappearing. Climate change, maybe early humans hunting them, all of that.
So how did colossal biosciences even start to bring them back?
Well, they started by extracting ancient DNA from a dire wolf tooth that was 13,000 years old. And they also used a skull that was way older, like 72,000 years old.
72,000. Wow, how do they even get DNA from something that old?
Well, that skull had a really well-preserved petrous bone. It's a dense part of the skull that's amazing at protecting DNA over time.
So they got the DNA, then what?
Then they had to sequence it, figure out the order of all those genetic letters to reconstruct the dire wolf genome.
Like putting together a giant puzzle, basically.
Exactly. And then they compared it to the genomes of living canads, like wolves and dogs. And guess what? They found that dire wolves were incredibly close to gray wolves, genetically speaking.
Yeah.
Like 99.5% identical.
99.5? That's crazy. So that means they could basically use gray wolves as a starting point.
That's the idea. They used gene editing to make about 20 specific changes to 14 genes in the gray wolf genome.
20 changes just like that. I mean, that's precise.
Yeah, it's pretty remarkable. They were targeting specific traits. The lighter coat color, longer hair, unique patterns, bigger size, more muscle mass, all the stuff that made dire wolves distinct.
Wow, and those changes actually resulted in wolf pups being born.
They did. They implanted those genetically modified embryos into surrogate dog mothers, and they gave birth to 3 healthy pups.
3 pups. That's incredible. I mean, think about the possibilities. Could we bring back extinct species in India? Like, I don't know, the Asiatic cheetah or something?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. De-extinction has the potential to play a role in restoring ecosystems and bringing back keystone species that were lost.
It's kind of like a second chance for those animals, right? But I imagine there are a lot of ethical concerns about this whole thing.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, we have to think about the potential for unintended consequences, like disrupting existing ecosystems. And we have to consider the welfare of those revived animals.
Yeah.
Are they going to be able to thrive in today's world?
Yeah, those are really important questions. And there's the whole debate about resources. Should we be putting so much money and effort into bringing back extinct species when there are so many living species on the brink of extinction right now?
That's a valid point. It's a complex issue with no easy answers. There's also a de-extinction project with Indian involvement called the Lazarus Project.
The Lazarus Project, interesting name. What's that one all about?
They're trying to bring back the extinct Himalayan quail using genetic material from museum specimens.
So it's a global effort, not just something Colossal Bioscience is doing.
That's right. But even the Convention on Biological Diversity, the CBD, is being pretty cautious about de-extinction. They're saying the priority should still be on protecting existing habitats and biodiversity.
Makes sense. I mean, we can't just bring back extinct species and expect everything to be magically fixed.
Exactly. It's a complex interplay of science, ethics, and ecological realities. And for your UPSC preparation, it's crucial to understand all those different perspectives.
All right, let's switch gears again, this time back to space. But this mission is focused on learning more about our own planet. Have you heard about the European Space Agency's biomass satellite mission?
Oh yeah, biomass. It's going to be a game changer for understanding our forests.
In what way?
Well, its main goal is to get much more accurate measurements of how much biomass there is in forests all over the world.
Biomass, meaning like the total amount of living matter in the forests.
Exactly. And that's super important for understanding the global carbon cycle because forests play a huge role in absorbing and storing carbon dioxide from the atmosphere.
So this satellite is basically going to help us figure out how much carbon our forests are actually holding.
That's right. And it's going to do it in amazing detail. It's going to create these three-dimensional maps of even the most dense and remote tropical forests.
Wow, three-dimensional maps. That's pretty impressive. How's it going to do that?
It's going to be launched on a Vega C rocket from French Guiana, and it's going to orbit Earth at an altitude of about 666 kilometers.
666, huh?
Yeah, and it's going to be in a sun-synchronous orbit. So it'll pass over the same spot on Earth at roughly the same local time each day, which is important for getting consistent lighting conditions for its measurements.
Okay, I get that. But what makes this biomass mission so special? Like, what's the big deal?
Well, it's going to be the first satellite with a long wavelength radar called a P-band radar, and that's a game changer.
A P-band radar? What's so special about that?
Well, the P-band radar has these longer wavelengths that allow it to penetrate deep through the forest canopy. It can basically see past the leaves and branches and get data directly from the tree trunks and larger branches.
Oh, I see. So it's kind of like seeing the forest skeleton.
Exactly. And that's where most of the carbon is stored in a tree. So by measuring those reflections from the trunks and branches, the satellite can give scientists really precise information about the forest height and the amount of above-ground biomass.
Which tells us how much carbon is being stored, right?
Exactly. It's like using X-ray vision to see inside the forests.
That's amazing. So this data is going to be incredibly valuable for researchers all over the world.
Oh yeah, for sure. It's going to help them assess the health of our forests, track how they're changing over time, and really refine our models of the global carbon cycle. Climate change is a big deal, and this mission is going to give us a much clearer picture of how our forests are helping to mitigate it.
Yeah, I can see why this is a big deal. And when is this mission scheduled to launch?
It's planned for 2025, and it'll operate for 5 years. So we'll get a lot of continuous data over time, which is essential for tracking those long-term trends in forest biomass.
Okay, 5 years of valuable data. That's great. Now, let's shift our attention back to India and talk about something a bit closer to home. The Electronics Components Manufacturing Scheme.
Ah, yes. The government's new initiative to boost domestic manufacturing of electronic components. It's a pretty big deal for India's economy.
Yeah, I was reading about it. This is the first dedicated production-linked incentive, or PLI, scheme for specific electronic components, right?
That's right. And it's focusing on passive components. Things like resistors, capacitors, speakers, microphones, those sorts of things. Basically, the building blocks of all our electronics.
And what kinds of incentives are they offering to get companies on board?
Well, there are 3 main types. First, there's the turnover-linked incentive, where companies get benefits based on how much their sales revenue increases from manufacturing these components in India.
So the more they produce and sell, the more they benefit.
Exactly. Then there's the CapEx-linked incentive, where the incentives are tied to the amount of money companies invest in building or expanding their manufacturing facilities in India.
So it's encouraging investment in infrastructure as well.
Right.
Yeah.
And then they have a hybrid model that combines those two approaches. The actual incentive rates will vary from 1 to 10%, depending on the year of production and the type of component being made.
Okay, so there's a lot of flexibility built in. And what about job creation? Is the government emphasizing that as part of the scheme?
Definitely. They've included a mandatory requirement for all the companies that participate to generate new jobs.
So it's not just about boosting production, it's about creating opportunities for people as well.
Right. And that's a key consideration, especially in a country like India with a large and young workforce. The scheme is going to run for 6 years, with a 1-year gestation period at the beginning for companies to get set up.
6 years, that's a good amount of time for companies to really ramp up their operations.
It is, and it's important to note that this scheme is specifically for passive electronic components. Active components, like semiconductor chips, are covered under a separate initiative, the India Semiconductor Mission.
Right, right. So it's all part of a larger strategy to strengthen India's position in the global electronics market.
Exactly. This scheme is going to be a big boost for industries like automotive, consumer electronics, and just the overall electronics manufacturing ecosystem in India. It's all about reducing reliance on imports and making India a manufacturing hub.
Now, let's move on to a topic in the realm of international relations and diplomacy. What can you tell us about the Inter-Parliamentary Union? I heard the Lok Sabha speaker gave a speech at their recent assembly.
Oh yeah, the IPU. It's a really important global organization. It's like a forum for national parliaments from all over the world.
So it's all about bringing together lawmakers from different countries.
That's right. And what's fascinating is that it was founded all the way back in 1889, making it the first multilateral political organization of its kind.
1889, wow. So they've been around for a while.
They have, and their motto is, for democracy, for everyone, which kind of sums up what they're all about.
It's a pretty good motto, I have to say. And how many members do they have?
They have 181 national parliaments as members, plus 15 associate members, which are usually parliamentary bodies from regional or international groups.
181, so that's most of the world's countries.
Pretty much. And they have a lot of different objectives, but it all boils down to promoting democracy and making parliaments stronger and more representative.
So what did they actually do to achieve that?
Well, for one thing, they advocate for parliaments to be more diverse, with younger members, more women, more representation from different backgrounds. They also defend the human rights of parliamentarians, which is super important in some countries where lawmakers face threats and persecution.
That's good to know. And they hold these big assemblies twice a year, right?
That's right. They bring together over 1,500 parliamentary delegates and partners to discuss global issues and contribute a parliamentary perspective to global governance.
So it's kind of like a mini UN for parliamentarians.
In a way, yeah. And they work closely with the UN on implementing the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, which is all about those big global goals like ending poverty and combating climate change.
It sounds like they have a lot of influence. And where are they based?
Their headquarters are in Geneva, Switzerland, and they're mainly funded by contributions from their member parliaments.
Okay, so it's a truly global organization with a long history and a really important mission.
It is. And for anyone studying for the UPSC, understanding how these international organizations work is really crucial.
Absolutely. Now let's turn our attention back to India and talk about an important administrative body. The Registrar General of India, or RGI.
Ah, yes. They've been in the news recently, reminding hospitals about the importance of reporting births and deaths on time.
It seems like something that should be pretty straightforward, right? But I guess it's more complicated than it sounds.
Well, you'd be surprised. But anyway, the RGI is a pretty crucial part of the Indian government. It was set up in 1949 under the Ministry of Home Affairs. And the main job of the RGI is to collect and manage population statistics.
Population statistics? Like how many people live in India?
Exactly. That and all sorts of other data, like the growth rate of the population, how it's distributed across different regions, all of that.
So they're responsible for making sure we have accurate information about India's population.
That's right. And they also have the job of implementing the Registration of Births and Deaths Act, which was passed in 1969.
So they're the ones who make sure all births and deaths are properly registered.
Exactly. And the Registrar General is a pretty senior official, usually holding the rank of a joint secretary in the government.
Okay, so it's a pretty important role. And apart from collecting birth and death statistics, what else does the RGI do?
Well, one of their biggest responsibilities is conducting the census of India.
The census, right. That
Yeah.
massive effort to count everyone in India every 10 years.
That's the one. It's a huge undertaking, and it gives us this incredibly detailed picture of India's demographics, socioeconomic conditions, and geographic characteristics.
So it's way more than just counting heads.
Oh yeah, it's this incredibly rich source of information that's used for all sorts of things, from planning government programs to understanding social trends. The first complete census was done in 1881, and we've done it 15 times since then, with the RGI overseeing it in the post-independence era.
15 times, that's pretty impressive. And besides the census, they also conduct the linguistic survey of India, right?
That's right. The LSI is all about documenting the incredible linguistic diversity of India. It's often done alongside the census, and it's a fascinating project that's given us so much insight into the languages spoken across the country. The first comprehensive LSI was completed by George Abraham Grierson in 1928.
So that's a long-running effort as well. It's amazing to think about all the work that goes into understanding India's population and its languages.
It is. And the RGI also oversees the Civil Registration System, or CRS, which is the national system for registering births and deaths.
So they're basically in charge of managing all that vital data.
Exactly. And their recent caution to hospitals just highlights how important accurate and timely data collection is for good governance, policymaking, and resource allocation.
Makes sense. Now, let's talk about something that's been a bit of a hot topic lately. The role of the governor in granting assent to bills passed by state legislatures.
Ah, yes. That recent Supreme Court judgment on the situation in Tamil Nadu has really brought this issue into the spotlight. It's a crucial aspect of Indian federalism.
Yeah, I was reading about it. The Supreme Court basically set some deadlines for governors to act on bills, right?
That's right. And it all stemmed from this situation with the governor of Tamil Nadu, R.N. Ravi. He was either withholding assent from or just delaying action on these 10 state bills that had been represented to him by the Tamil Nadu Assembly.
10 bills, that's a lot. And what was the reason for the delay?
Well, that's where things get a bit tricky. The governor was also reserving some of these bills for the president's consideration, which the Supreme Court ultimately said was unconstitutional.
So it's this complex interplay of powers between the governor, the state assembly, and the president.
Exactly. And to understand this whole thing, it's important to know a bit about the relevant articles of the Constitution. Article 200 outlines the different options a governor have when a bill is passed by the state legislature. They can give assent, withhold assent, or reserve it for the president.
Okay, 3 options. And what happens if a bill is reserved for the president?
Well, that's where Article 201 comes in. It deals with the president's powers in those situations. But the Supreme Court was very clear in this case that the governor's actions were overstepping those boundaries.
So what did the Supreme Court actually say in their judgment?
Well, they made some very important observations. They said that when a bill is repassed by the state assembly after being returned for reconsideration, it's considered to have received the governor's assent from the date it was represented.
So no more delaying tactics.
That's the idea. And they also clarify that the governor isn't supposed to have these independent powers to just do whatever they want. They have to act on the advice of the Council of Ministers in most matters, including granting consent to bills.
Okay, so it's a check on the governor's power, making sure they're not acting unilaterally.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The Supreme Court also emphasized that a governor can't use an absolute veto or a pocket veto by just sitting on bills indefinitely. They said those kinds of delays disrupt the whole legislative process and go against the spirit of federalism and democratic governance.
So the governor can't just obstruct the will of the elected representatives.
Exactly. And here's the big thing. The Supreme Court actually laid down specific timelines for governors to act on bills.
Oh, wow. So they actually set deadlines. That's pretty significant.
It is. They said that if a governor wants to withhold assent or reserve a bill for the president, they have to do it within 1 month.
1 month? That's not a lot of time.
Yeah, right. And if they want to send a bill back to the assembly for reconsideration, they have 3 months. But if a bill is repassed, they only have 1 month to give their assent.
So they can't just keep kicking the can down the road.
Nope. And the Supreme Court also said that if a governor doesn't act within those timelines, their inaction can be challenged in court.
So there's accountability built into the system now.
Exactly. This judgment really reaffirms those democratic principles enshrined in the Constitution. The elected representatives are the ones who make the laws, and the governor's role is to facilitate that process, not hinder it.
It's all about checks and balances, right? Making sure that no one branch of government has too much power.
That's the beauty of a well-designed Constitution. And for those preparing for the UPSC, understanding these nuances of Indian federalism is absolutely crucial.
For sure. Now let's talk about something completely different. Quantum supremacy. I'm fascinated by this whole field. It seems like we're on the cusp of some incredible breakthroughs.
It really does feel like we're living in the future, doesn't it? I mean, scientists recently demonstrated quantum supremacy using just a simple mathematical problem.
Just a simple problem. That's pretty amazing.
It is. They use something called the odd cycle graph coloring problem. It's basically about trying to color a loop with an odd number of points using only two colors, but in a way that no two adjacent points have the same color.
That sounds kind of tricky.
It is. It's actually impossible to do in classical computing. But they managed to do it using a quantum computer with just two entangled qubits.
Two qubits, that's all it took. I thought quantum computers were supposed to be these massive, complex machines.
Well, some of them are. Like Google's experiment a few years ago used 53 qubits. But this new demonstration shows that you can achieve quantum supremacy with a surprisingly simple setup.
So it's not just about the number of qubits, it's about how you use them.
Exactly. And it all comes down to the fundamental difference between classical and quantum computing. Classical computers use bits, which are either 0 or 1. Quantum computers use qubits, which can be 0, 1, or both at the same time.
Both at the same time. That's mind-boggling.
It's called superposition. And it's one of the things that makes quantum computers so powerful. They can basically perform calculations in parallel, exploring many possibilities at once.
So they can crunch numbers way faster than classical computers.
There's certain types of problems, yes. And then there's entanglement, which is this weird quantum phenomenon where two or more qubits are linked together no matter how far apart they are.
So if you change one qubit, the other one changes instantly, even if they're miles apart.
That's the idea. It's like they're communicating faster than the speed of light.
That's insane. So what are the implications of this quantum supremacy stuff? Like, why should we care?
Well, for one thing, it has huge potential for cryptography. Creating unbreakable codes and secure communications.
That's pretty important in today's world.
It is. And it could also revolutionize drug discovery, material science, artificial intelligence, all sorts of fields.
It sounds like quantum computing is going to change the world.
It has the potential to. And India is actually taking this field very seriously. They launched the National Quantum Mission last year with the budget of 6,000 crore rupees to support research and development in quantum technologies.
6,000 crore, that's a serious investment.
It is. And India has some world-class research institutions working in this area, like the Indian Institute of Science in Bengaluru, the Tata Institute of Fundamental Research in Mumbai, and IIT Madras.
So India is well positioned to be a player in the quantum computing game.
Absolutely. But there are still challenges, like reducing error rates in qubits, making quantum computers more scalable, and managing the costs. But the potential is huge, and it's definitely an area to watch closely.
All right, one last topic for today. The president of India recently visited Portugal and Slovakia. What was the focus of those visits?
Well, it was all about strengthening ties with Europe. Portugal was the first stop, and it was a historic visit because it coincided with the 50th anniversary of diplomatic relations between India and Portugal.
50 years, that's a long time.
It is. And Portugal is an interesting country. It's the westernmost country in continental Europe, located on the Iberian Peninsula. That's the peninsula that also includes Spain. And it has these beautiful autonomous island regions, Madeira and the Azores.
Madeira, I've heard of that. It's known for its wine, right?
That's right. And the Azores are these volcanic islands in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. It's a pretty diverse country, geographically speaking.
Yeah.
And it has a maritime temperate climate, so it's pretty mild and pleasant most of the year.
Sounds nice. And how's the relationship between India and Portugal?
It's growing stronger. Bilateral trade between the two countries is currently around 1.5 billion US dollars, and it's increasing steadily. And Portugal is actually the first European country to sign a migration and mobility agreement with India.
So it's easier for people to move between the two countries now.
That's right. It's a big step for promoting people-to-people ties, making it easier for students and professionals to travel and work in both countries. And after Portugal, the president went to Slovakia.
Slovakia? What's that country like?
Well, it's a landlocked country in Central Europe. It's surrounded by Poland, Ukraine, Hungary, Austria, and the Czech Republic. So it's right in the heart of Europe. And geographically, it's mostly mountainous, with the Carpathian Mountains running through it. Those mountains include the Tatra Mountains, which have some of the highest peaks in Central Europe.
So it's a pretty scenic country.
Oh yeah, definitely. And the president's visit there coincided with the 30th anniversary of the Indian embassy in Bratislava, the Slovakian capital.
30 years, another milestone.
It is. And during the visit, India expressed its gratitude to Slovakia for helping to evacuate Indian students from